repeatedly denied any wrongdoing and has not been charged with any crime. While Gatez was not mentioned in the plea deal, speculation is growing that his time may be coming soon. This banner reading TikTok Matt Gatez flew outside the courthouse this morning. Joining our conversation, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman. Claire is still here as well. Harry, when an attorney for someone who's doing a plea deal says, I was on a mission last time, I achieved that mission, what does that mean?
Well, first, it means he's talking out of school and he ought to be more careful. But what it really means here, especially when what he had said previously was Matt Gatez is uncomfortable, is I had the mission of persuading federal authorities to give me, my client, a lesser sentence for me to tell everything about Matt Gatez. And man, did he ever. This is an 88-page plea agreement, extremely long, Nicole, longer than anything I've ever seen, that sets it out in chapter and verse. If anyone wants to, download it and just go to page 30 and 31, and it's got terrifying specificity and depth as to what happened with the 17-year-old girl. We are talking texts and hotels and exact number of money and when the encounters were. And if, as all indications suggest, we're talking about Gatez, and the plea agreement also says he also had, that this woman or girl really had sex with other men that he brought in and had drugs with her first and the like, you know, Gatez is in a terrible position, and really there's a mountain of evidence arrayed against him, and they've shown it in this very document, all of which Greenberg has signed off on and said in front of the court, which made a finding that this is accurate and this is what would be proven if he went to trial.
And Claire, just speak as a former prosecutor yourself. When you have a witness like Greenberg, obviously you know what you're dealing with, and it's been reported by the New York Times he's been talking to the feds since December. Presumably, those 2 pages, 31 and 32, that Harry cites, that was some of what they were doing, maybe corroborating his accounts or sort of baking it into the cake that he might not be the most credible witness on the stand. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, I mean, what Harry, I'm sure, would back me up here. What you're seeing here is you're seeing a prosecution that has been put together with an eye towards another prosecution. The amount of specificity in this plea deal is unusual. And you say, well, why do they need all that? Well, what they're doing here is they're building up Greenberg's credibility. These 2 guys were arrogant punks that thought they could live this wild lifestyle, immoral, drugs, 17-year-old underage women, paying women for sex, and that they would never be held accountable. So they used electronic devices. And what they've done here is they have tied the facts to electronic communications. So Matt Gatez, who's going to take a page out of Trump's book and say, what, me? You know, I did something naughty, or that was just locker room talk. They're going to be able to build up the credibility of the chief witness against him, which will be Greenberg, that in all likelihood that Matt Gatez was involved in the trafficking of this girl, that he paid for sex with her, that he used drugs with her. And I have a feeling that Greenberg's not the only witness here. I mean, we know Matt Gatez was such an idiot. He was showing pictures of women unclothed to colleagues on the House floor. Now, where the hell are all the Republicans? All of the people that want to lecture us about when we should have the ability to control our own bodies. Where are they today? Why aren't they speaking up against this guy? It is unbelievable to me that the women in the Republican Party are not calling this man out right now. They're going to end up looking stupid when he finally pleads guilty, which I predict he probably will, or be found guilty by a jury.
I mean, on that, Harry, can you read anything, you know, and really to both of you, but can you deduce anything about where this investigation into Gatez may stand timing-wise?
Yeah, well, timing, he's a sitting congressman, and I think they are going now to want to accelerate it. And they've got it all. I mean, that evidence is already there. I agree 100% with Claire, although he's in a tough spot because there's a 10-year mandatory minimum. Of course, he's also being investigated on all kinds of different conduct. Remember the possibly medical marijuana quid pro quo, or the weird trip to the Bahamas. So there might be, as with Greenberg, a set of crimes that he could try to trade off, except the department, I think, will not let him take a pass on this, which is most important. And there's just not room, as there what Greenberg could say, I'll plead and get a lesser sentence, and he will, for cooperating up. Where's Gates supposed to go? And in any event, it is a mandatory minimum. So Claire's, all this is corroborating, or you could even put it, it puts Greenberg's obvious record of dishonesty beside the point, because we've got letter and verse of credit card bills in hotels. There'll probably be witnesses, the victim herself, maybe her friends. He's in big, big trouble, and I don't see how he wriggles out from this one main charge.
Claire, I want to come back to, I think, a broader point you're making about the Republicans. It's two things, right? It's the brazen nature of what's alleged, that he allegedly paid for sex through Venmo. And then it's the indifference of the Republicans, who were so busy playing whack-a-mole with Liz Cheney for having the audacity to not repeat the lie behind the insurrection that had them all barricaded in their office, and not crickets with an alleged sex trafficker. And this isn't... It's a big deal, as you're both saying. It's a 10-year mandatory minimum federal sentence for sex trafficking a minor. Where does the Republican Party go in terms of saying that they stand for any sort of morality anymore? I guess when you're pro big lie, morality isn't really on the table. Or what do you make of just the dissonance?
Well, I mean, and we can talk about this as we talk about Liz Cheney versus Kevin McCarthy later in the hour. But we have a civil war in the Republican Party between integrity and character and political expediency. And here's the bottom line. Matt Gaetz is a celebrated figure within the Trump base, and Trump has not said a word. And the reason all the members of Congress are afraid to stick their necks out and state the obvious, that Matt Gaetz should be removed from his committee assignments pending the outcome of all of this, that he should not be looked at as a golden boy out doing rallies to get people excited about voting for Republicans. That all should happen right now. And the reason it's not is because Donald Trump sees Matt Gaetz as his guy. I mean, this is his guy. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz, they are two peas in a pod. And I bet if you put some true serum in Donald Trump, he'd say, well, you know, what he did was not that bad. I mean, she was 17. I just don't think that there's much integrity left in terms of character in the majority of the Republican office holders, because they're so worried about their chief, the former guy, who clearly was grabbing women's vaginas and foisting himself upon them because he was famous and thought it was fun to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of room underneath. Grab him in the, between the legs to fall. Harry, I want to pull you in on a different topic. If we move to a place where Matt Gaetz is charged, is it a defense to say he didn't know how old she is?
No, it's a really tough law in exactly that way. It used to be a defense to say she really didn't look like it. Now, if you had, this is what the law says, an opportunity to observe her, then it doesn't matter what she looked like, what she said she was. And the plea agreement does say she initially said she was over 18. It doesn't matter. A special provision here says as long as you had the opportunity to observe her, then that knowledge requirement is met. And so that can't possibly fly. To Claire's point, I think they try to maybe be quiet, but once he's indicted, this is one of the reasons I think that the DOJ will move with some expedition. That's going to be when the pressure becomes huge on them. And remember, one of the committees he's on is the Judiciary Committee that oversees DOJ. That's a completely untenable position for someone charged with this crime.
And it's always important to remind everyone that this investigation was opened when Bill Barr was the Attorney General and briefed to the highest levels of that Justice Department. Harry